Okay, this time it's a Predator. Here's a few spoiler pics of the final piece. And this was made out of 100 spoons, a couple of old screwdrivers, the kick plate from the bottom of a door, an old shower rack, and a handful of nuts, bolts and nails. I was using a few photos of Predators for reference throughout the build, and the pose I took from Thor flying through the air with a hammer. So if you'd like to see how I made this, keep watching.
First job here is I've got some fairly thick spoon handles and I want to make a fairly rudimentary stickman that emulates Thor's pose, and I'm taking the trouble to put in a cross member for the pelvis rather than just having the two spoons joined together, and that is quite important. I won't show every weld I do here all throughout the build. I'm just going to show the tack welds basically, but you'll get an idea of how the thing's put together. Need to put a spine and a backbone in, and because he's throwing a spear, his back is going to be slightly arched to generate the power for the throw. So I'm just getting a bit of old rod here. I'm going to clean that up, check the dimensions are right, and then I'm going to just put it in the vise, and with some gentle hammer taps I'm going to put that little curve into it. So I'll just tap it a bit, pull it out a fraction, tap it a bit more, repeat the process, and you get the gentle curve, and on it goes. So now, starting with the leg spoons, there's two spoons from ankle to knee, and when I bend them in the vise they'll obviously form a crease which will form the shin bone, so it's important that I line up the creases in both spoons so that when the light catches it, it's a straight line. Equally, when I bend the spoons in the vise here, I tend to use a small metal wedge I hold against the side of the spoon, and that enables me to crush the spoon at a taper rather than just crushing it with square, straight sides, which is obviously quite important for a leg which tapers from thin at the ankle to thick at the hip. So doing the lower leg on the spoon on the other leg. And just putting the first of the upper leg spoons on. I now need to start filling in the legs, and just to give a quick example of how I did that, I crushed a teaspoon with a taper jig, fitted it inside the larger dessert spoon on the lower leg, and tacked it in place. Jumping ahead here, you can see the other leg is almost finished.
So, this is just a question of building up more and more spoons, trying to appreciate the shape of the leg. You know, there's quite a bit of meat to the back of the ham, and obviously the quads I've tried to do with different sized spoons here, a teaspoon and a bigger one on the outside. So there's the teaspoon, there's a bigger one to go on the outside.
And these spoons going on here are forming the insides of the upper leg, and there's a couple more to go on the outside that will form the upper hip.
I bend that around. It's a bit rude at the moment, that's not what you think it is.
And I'm just using a bit of hoover pipe here, it's just got the correct radius for the bend I'm looking for. And that's the legs pretty much done. Okay, so the legs are done, and I'm now putting a little cross member here which will approximate the width of the shoulders. And from there I can then start tacking on the arms. Obviously I'm referring to the Thor picture, trying to get the dimensions of the arms correct and the limbs in the right position. Right, having done that, I've got to get that little codpiece on, so I've just built a little frame with a spoon hand around there. The final belt will go over the top of that. Bending a little bit of scrap rod here to form the sides, which I'll build the lat muscles on. So one of them each side, and then I'm going to do a very similar thing with the chest as well. And I'll put another one in for the back, and that'll give me a full frame of the upper body. Okay, now I've got a theory on the abs here, so I've got a couple of teaspoons, and I fancy if I just nick the ends off so they're square, put them together, it might just work.
Let me get that together and see what it looks like.
And it looked perfectly acceptable, so I made 4 sets of them in total, with the upper abs being ground slightly thinner. So some spoons I've had to put on the side before I could put those abs on, and I've also started building up the lower back spoons here, and I'm going to continually work up the sides and the back before I can put each additional set of abs on. What I've done here is I've left the handles on the teaspoon, and I'm going to twist them round and up to form the oblique muscles. Just marking one of those handles here, I'll just cut that off with a cutting disc, tack it in place, and that's the obliques complete. More back spoons. Some of these are 20-second fit, some take 20 minutes. But it's important to try and get as close to a zero tolerance fit as you can, and the weld is good and strong. Okay, so I'm just trial fitting the final set of abs there. Those are the ones I've cut slightly thinner. And I've just got to build a couple of spoons up on the side and underneath the chest so that I can mount all those. So those are the spoons onto which the chest will mount. And then I've got the 2 biggest spoons I could find, just cut them square, lining them up there. I'm going to tack weld them together, and then I'm just going to grind the edges slightly more triangular, slightly more realistic look, and that's them going on. So a couple more spoons to form the top of the chest and the collarbone area.
Right, memory card was full there, you missed a couple of bits, but basically just bicep, forearm, tricep, bicep, forearm. Got to put a tricep on here now. I think this spoon will work quite well, so we'll try that.
And it did work quite well, although the other side I did rework the bicep and the tricep, so that arm will look, the right arm, well, the predator's left arm, the right as you look at it will end up slightly different.
Okay, so this is the door kick plate I'm using here. Just cutting it into strips, shaping the corners a bit and wrapping it around the body to form elementary side armour. I did actually change this a little bit later on. It wrapped around the front of the body a little bit too much, and I wanted more of the sort of ab and oblique muscles exposed. I thought it looked a bit better. So what you see here does actually get changed just a little bit. So there are some leather straps holding the armour together, and I'll simulate that with thin strips of that kick plate. And then where all the straps join together, I'll put a washer on top, a little plug weld to fill it all up, and then I'll grind that flush so it looks a little bit like a fastening. Is it recording? It is recording. Okay, this is a bit of an experiment. Just want to create some chest armour that comes over from the back. So something like that. A little bit to guess, but I reckon I'm going to cut a hole about there. So that is the next job, to trim this so that it fits neatly around these ladles. Nearest fraction out here. Okay, bit of detail work now, some thinner welding wire. Just going to put a rivet effect on the edge of these. Alright, let's clean that up and see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm reworking the neck armour at the moment. Here's a photo of the first bit of neck armour I did. I'm not happy with that. It's not really good enough, but I spent quite a lot of time making it a good fit to the body, so I can fortunately save some of that time and use it as a template. So what I've done, I've cut it off the body. Before I did that, I welded a couple of spoon handles to it so that when it came off it wouldn't spring open. So this is the exact shape it needs to be. I've added a couple of pieces here. This is my rough sketch for what I want the armour to look like. So what I'm going to do is basically build a layer of weld all the way over that, up to the level of the spoon handles. That's my base layer, and then I will lay more weld down in this pattern here, and I'll use a cutting disc on an angle grinder to make the cross cuts, and that should leave me with something like that. Okay, that's starting to come up quite well. I'm going to give that a quick wire brush. We'll see what it looks like. What I would like to do though is cut across here and make it look a little bit more like my sketch. You can watch the rest of this build in upcoming videos within the next few days. If you liked it, please do click the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to see what I can do with this, and I'd love for people to see what I'm doing. So if you also find able to share it on social media, I would hugely appreciate it. Thanks for watching.